here physically, you would have had to come to class from whichever time, 8:30 to 5:30. You would have had to come to class, sit down, finish the whole lecture before you go home. So it's true, online gives you the flexibility, but you still have to attend class. Okay. I know if there's things that are serious or going on, you're not able to attend class, that I can understand. But you have to carve out the time. That's why we sent the class times from semester 1. So that if you need to negotiate with your boss, for her, I can understand, she's coming in semester 2. That I can understand. But for people from semester 1, that's why we send the dates way ahead of time. So that if you have difficulties, you can negotiate with your boss or whoever. And if you need a letter from us, we'll write the letter, send to you. Very, very important. Very, very important. Because you're missing out a lot. Even when you listen to recording, it's not the same. You miss out on the engagements that happen and what knowledge, skills, or whatever it will spark in you to contribute. Yeah. So please, very, very important that people ensure that they don't miss the Tuesday and Thursday sessions, because it adds up to your DP. And if you remember, for you to be able to write the exam, you need to achieve a minimum of 45%. If you don't achieve 45% for the continuous assessment, that is attending lectures, online activities, assignments, all those combined, if you don't achieve 45%, you may not be able to write the exam. And if that happens, it means you failed the course. It means you have to come and redo the course. Okay. So I just wanted to mention that. And I'm recording so people will know. So it's Tuesday and Thursday classes are actually compulsory. But we do know we try to be flexible, but you have to show that you've made your plans to be able to attend, and then there were extenuating circumstances, circumstances beyond your control. Okay. Right. Vigili said, hi, I hope you are all well. Masabata is traveling. She won't be able to join today class, but we'll listen to the recording. It's okay. Okay, that's what Cedric was reporting. Okay. And so you said the session is available for download once it is available in Teams. Okay, so the ones for Tuesday, were you people able to find the recording on Teams? Did you find the recording on Teams? The class on Tuesday. That's the class on the 21st. Was anybody able to find the recording on Teams?
In the folder, I didn't check, but I can check if it's still available.
Check, please, because from me, it showed that.
On my side, it's saying that the recording is not available because of the storage thing.
That's it.
So it's the last week's lectures that we have, not this week.
Exactly. That's it. So that's why that's the part of the warning I'm giving to people, that we may not have the recording all the time because we're limited by space, which we can use. Okay. So don't count on the recording at all. Count on coming to class. The recording should always be as backup in case, when you have those circumstances beyond your control, which you've tried everything, but beyond the control, you could not attend, then hopefully you have the recording. Okay. Because the internet are trying to sort that out. We're trying to sort that out. All right. So welcome everybody. So we still have some people still missing. We're about 5 in class. Yeah, because the rest of us is Inati, myself, and our 2 sign language interpreters. Yeah. So we only have 5 people out of 11 in class. So 6 people are missing. Okay. But so that we don't go over time, let's go on. So today what we said was that we're going to go through the second. Unati, please jump in anytime, every time, just jump in anytime if you want to say anything, or please just feel free. It's you and I running this ship.
No problem at all.
Okay, thanks.
I enjoy listening to you talking.
Okay. Yeah, please jump in. All right, guys. So we agreed last week. We said, luckily, we've gone through Amani's lecture. He will be joining us from 5 on decoloniality. I didn't get your questions or comments for him. So we'll see when he comes in the afternoon. Ilam sends apology. She says she emailed Dr. Ike. Okay. I'll check. People, when you email me, it's so busy that there's hardly having the time to look at your email If you email me a day before, there's hardly time for me to be able to see that. I only able to get your email 2 to 3 days afterwards. If I email you immediately, if I reply to you immediately, it means I was on my email and I saw your email coming. It's just so busy, and I'm teaching undergrad, supervising, all those things. So once I finish with you guys, I jump onto other things. Yeah. So if it's something that is very urgent, then please contact your tutor. Let Tendani know. Tendani will then reach me. Okay. If it's something, but it's not something urgent, yeah, just give me 2-3 days and I'll get you your email. All right.
They can also send to me, Ike.
Aha. So when you
I'm
send,
not
please.
as busy as you are.
Yet.
I am also busy, but some of the emails they must copy me. I'll try and respond to those. I might
Yes.
get to them much earlier than you.
Yes. So please, when you email, always, because Unati and I run the course together. So please always copy Unati in when you email me. So if I'm not able to respond on time, she'll be able to respond. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Unati. All right. If you remember, we said last week, we said we went through Amani's lecture. Okay. So he's coming, like I said, from 5. Today we said we'll go through the rest of Dr. Dalton's lecture, where she goes into more detail about UDL, because it will really, really help you with the different reflections you're doing this week. But your online activity for this week is on decoloniality. I'm really interested to hear or to read what ideas you have, because like we said, it is our job as African scholars, emerging African scholars, to start changing the landscape of academia, to start changing the landscape of knowledge production, to start changing the landscape of what we see by skills, start changing the landscape about the ways in which we create knowledge, the way we formalize our personhood, what it means to be a person, okay? And also, in doing that, we talk about the last on Tuesday, to also don't idealize our ways. So don't say, oh, because we went through colonization, and colonization, most part was bad, if not all parts, was bad, and blah, blah, and the rest of it, that, oh, our ways of being and knowledge is not open to scrutiny. That is not the way. Mani spoke about it. There are also ways in which we think around disability which are harmful. And as scholars, it's our job to critically look at these ways. Yeah. So very, very important. All right. So what we'll do now, we'll just go into that lecture. We finish it. Hopefully we'll finish, and any discussions that come up, we finish it before 5:30. Was that before 4:30. Because at 4:30 we'll now take our break, come back at 5. By that time Amani will join, and then we'll have a discussion with Amani. Anybody has any questions with regards to the flow or any other aspect before we start watching the lecture? Okay. All right, let's go through. Share my screen. Okay. Hopefully people can see what I'm sharing. Just give me a thumbs up, just in case Teams is all right, thanks. Okay, so make this, can I make this, no, pause, make it bigger. Okay, all right, here we go.
Okay, so picking up where we left off. Everyone can see my screen now? Wonderful. So that basically finished just the basic information section about universal design for learning. Hopefully I was able to clarify the difference between universal design and universal design for learning, and also to expand your knowledge of what universal design for learning is and how it's organized in both those vertical and horizontal ways. It's all different ways for you to be able to think about UDL and how you might want to begin to interact with it and use it in your work. So now we go into the tools section, and in order to implement the knowledge that you have, you do need a variety. There are a variety of tools that are available that you can use. This one we've seen before. This is the Universal Design for Learning framework. It encompasses the principles, it encompasses the guidelines, and then the small points in each one of those 9 principles are what they call the checkpoints. Now, one of the things I want to talk about here is the fact that sometimes people feel a little overwhelmed with UDL because you look at the whole framework and you say, wow, this is so much. Do I have to implement it all? Do I have to implement it all at the same time? And my response to that is absolutely not. You need to find the right place to start, dependent upon the particular needs that you have presented to you in your classroom. But this is the ultimate goal, where we're working towards developing expert learners who are purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, strategic and goal-directed. So we talked about that first horizontal level, the access level. If we don't have access in our classrooms, then we're not going to be able to move to the next levels. But the problem is that sometimes people attain the access level and then stop there. And that's for universal design for learning to truly achieve its purposes of developing expert learners for all individuals. We need to keep in mind that we have to move and progress further through the build and internalize levels so that we're able to move towards those independent learners. So I just wanted to say that you don't have to do it all at once. You need to think about where it makes most logical sense to start, but you can't just stop at the access level if you really want to have the full power of universal design for learning implemented in your learning setting. So this is the first tool we have, the framework. It's clearly defined. It uses that systematic variability and presents things in a very clear way. The second tool that I want you to think about is just this basic idea of curriculum design and how we develop curriculum within our classrooms. And I've defined this as the 4 realms of curriculum. First, starting out with the goals, setting what is the particular goal that is to be achieved, whether it's a goal, the goal in a lesson, a particular lesson, or a goal for a unit, or a goal for a semester, or whatever it is. You have to have a particular goal statement so it makes it clear where the students need to strive, what you want them to achieve. Then underneath that, we have the areas of methods and materials, right? And this is where we're really going to do our variation, because as you know, sometimes we have the control over setting the goals for students who are in special education programs. Many times we can customize those goals dependent upon their individualized education plan. But when we have standardized goals, we can't change those. Those are the goals that we have for all students. So what do we do there? What we do is we maintain the goal, but we take out the means by which that goal has to be achieved. We take that out of the goal statement. And basically what we want to do is we want to vary the methods and the materials that we use in order to design our instruction for that goal. And the variations then, the ideas for the variations in materials and the variations for methods come from that universal design for learning framework that we just looked at. And then, of course, the last thing is assessments. And the assessments always have to loop back to the goals, but there are so our assessments have to be able to show that that goal has been achieved. But there are variations that we can make in our assessments. And actually in the next tool, I'm going to talk about how we in Rhode Island have defined some of those variations in assessments. Now, if CAST was talking to you, they would correctly say that the variations for assessment are infused throughout the framework and the various goals, the various guidelines and the checkpoints. And that is true. But what we found was that assessments needed to be a little more clearly defined in order for teachers to truly understand them. So this is the third tool that I've provided to you, and you have this full framework. I don't like to move away from the presentation because sometimes it's difficult to get back. So this is just a screenshot of the very first page. But in Rhode Island, what happened, the reason we developed this, and this is the version from 2019, the most recent version, but we started working on this back in about 2009, when I was working with Universal Design for Learning with teachers in Rhode Island. And what we found was that we wanted a tool that we could give to teachers that they could print out and they could use for two different purposes. They could use it as a guide in order to plan lessons or plan their instruction, but they could also use it as a guide to go into a classroom and to identify to what extent various UDL features are present within that classroom and which ones they felt what they would like to bring in. So it can be used for both observation and also for planning purposes. And one of the additions that we made is that you can see we have the principle, we have the various guidelines, and we have the checkpoints, which are the like 1.1, 1.2. And then underneath those, there's the smaller print that's there in red are actually the examples of the variables that you could think about in order to achieve that particular checkpoint. So this is kind of a step-by-step guide that you can use in getting ideas for planning your instruction and the variations that can be used in order to provide alternatives for auditory information, alternatives for visual information, different ways of clarifying language and language structure and rules. So this is a checklist that really expands that original Universal Design for Learning framework. And I encourage you to use it in whatever way you find is most useful to you. Now, I had just talked in the previous slide about the about curriculum, right? And the idea of assessments and varying assessments. So here, in this particular checklist, what you'll notice is that on the very last page, there's actually like a fourth principle. So we have multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression, multiple means of engagement, and multiple means of organizing our assessments. We actually developed that idea for a fourth principle. It's not an official fourth principle, but we like to think of it that way here in Rhode Island. And it looks at pulling out the variables that you can use in the whole process of assessment. And what we've identified are 5 different areas: various options for methods of assessment, various options for the formats of assessment, various options for the scope, range, and level of assessment, different ways of providing options for what product is expected or the outcome that's expected, and then also options for the feedback that is provided to the learners during and after the assessment. So we felt that those 5 areas were ones that would be helpful to teachers in thinking about how assessments themselves can be modified. Now, granted, I know that there are certain standardized assessments that have some, that are provided in a standard way. But as you're moving to expand accessibility within your systems, you should consider bringing up the idea to provide different methods or formats or various other products that can still achieve that particular goal. So it's a process. Things don't change completely all at once, but by considering these variations, you can be in a position to provide some guidance and support when those opportunities do come up. So this is a third tool. The fourth tool that I've provided to you is one called the step-by-step planner, which helps in the development of lessons according to the Universal Design for Learning framework. And it was developed by an organization called Understood for All. And I really like this particular tool because it kind of takes you step by step through the process of goal development and then the various principles of engagement, of representation, of action and expression, asking questions and helping to guide how you can move towards lesson plans that will incorporate universal design for learning. So this is a tool that can be used with the checklist and with the UDL original framework grid in order to help you to develop lessons that are more integrating universal design for learning. And students that have used this tool have felt it's pretty straightforward and enjoyed using it. Now, I have this final tool to present to you, and this one comes from chapter 11 in the book that's on your resource list, Universal Access Through Inclusive Instructional Design, International Perspectives on UDL. And one of the things I love about this particular tool is it's a tool that was developed in order to help address the needs of learners who are in special education, who have differing needs or disabilities, but it takes into account the idea of universal design for learning. It was, so it's an instructional planning tool developed by educators and researchers at Purdue University. And it's organized by asking questions about these 6 different areas. What are the tasks and demands that are required of the student or students? What is the environment like? What are the potential obstacles? What are the adaptations that can be provided in order to improve performance? What is the training and instructional support that's necessary? And also then looking at how effective have all of these adjustments been in helping the student to accomplish their task. So this can be blended with the other tools in order to think through the specialized needs that students in special education have. So these are some of the questions that are asked under tasks and demands. What does the environment require, and what tasks do the learners need to do? So identifying that, and then identifying for the environment, what are the features of the classroom or school? How many learners are there? How many teachers are there? How does the space look? Are there any, physical barriers and things like that? The third one is potential barriers. What are the disconnects between the demands and the environment that are going to impact the learners? What are the things that are going to create obstacles? And then what are the potential barriers for students with different characteristics and needs? And we started to get into that area when we did our Jamboard. So you can see that there's an overlap between many of these tools. Then the fourth area is asking questions about what are the adaptations? What can be done to improve the environment? What is available to match the learner with the tasks and the demands? Fifth, the training. What is the training that's needed for the learners? If you're recommending some type of technology supports or other strategies and things like that, is there particular training that the learner is going to need in order for them to be able to use those tools? What is the training that's needed for the teachers, and what short-term and long-term supports are already available that can be accessed, right? And then finally, effectiveness. We want to have continual monitoring, assessment, and follow-up of this, the decisions that have been made through this model. It's important to schedule team meetings in order for the individuals on the inclusive education team to be working together and to review these learner effectiveness regularly. So all of these questions then work in parallel with universal design for learning, because UDL provides the ideas about how to design a learning environment. And then these questions can be used as a check for the students who have varied needs in order to make sure that the variations that they're going to need are going to be incorporated in your design of learning. So that's a variety of the different tools that we have. All of them approach this idea of inclusive instructional design from a little different perspective, but when used together, they can be extremely powerful tools in order to help you to better achieve a more inclusive instruction. So the third area I want to talk with you about is some application. And I have a number of examples of a UDL that, I've worked with the integration of UDL and different ways that UDL can be applied in various contexts so that it is understandable to the individuals who need it. So first of all, I just want to remind you that UDL, it was first designed here in the United States. So when we want to move it to a different context, we have to take into account the unique features of that particular environment. And this gets us into this whole idea of intersectionality of needs and a number of different concepts. So I understand that sometimes when you might look at universal design for learning and the whole framework. You might say, what does this really mean? How can we be applying it to our environment? And those are all very valid questions and ones that need to be and justifiably should be addressed by yourselves at the local level in terms of interpreting the content and the understanding of UDL into a way that is understandable in your own context. So in order to be able to better contextualize universal design for learning in your own setting, what I suggest is looking at a number of different things. First, in the beginning of this presentation, we talked about some of the US laws. But it's important that you understand and are very clear about the educational laws that relate to your particular setting, to your environment. What are the driving forces within South Africa, within various other countries in Africa, within various other countries around the world? I do work with people in India and in other places around the world, and everyone has different laws that are in place. And as I said, those laws drive the change within that particular country. So you have to be aware of your own locally relevant educational laws in order to move towards better contextualizing UDL. Secondly, we want to recognize the cultural priorities and also this idea of intersectionality. How about things like language, cultural values, different various uneven implementation based upon economics or race or different things like that. What are the factors that intersect in order to drive the needs within your particular environment? So those cultural priorities and the intersectionality of those need to be considered. Thirdly, there's just an understanding of key terms. I know when on one of my first trips to South Africa, I realized that when I was using the term inclusion, it was really understood in a very different way than what I understood it in the United States. So we want to be sure that we're very clear that we are talking the same language and understanding terms in the same way, because if we're trying to teach about something and our students are understanding things in a different way than we are intending, then that's going to be a problem. So, and then also understanding the current practices and barriers to learning that exist within that particular setting. So all of these things play a part in how we can, in things that we have to consider if we're going to be successful in using universal design for learning within differing settings. I also wanted to talk a little bit and say a few words about technology in relation to universal design for learning. So there's often a question, technology or no technology? Can UDL be effectively implemented without the use of technology? And the reality is that there are different schools of thought that exist out there within the literature and within the field regarding UDL and technology and the needs for technology to do UDL. When CAST first started, it was a center for, again, the word CAST stands for Center for Applied Special Technology. So they were a technology center. They basically worked with assistive technologies for people with disabilities. So their thinking was very technology focused. And they based the early work of UDL on how technology could be used as an effective tool to support learning. So, but there are really two schools of thought. That first, the UDL framework does not require technology. We can use other materials and strategies and still achieve the principles and the guidelines and the various other components within the framework itself. And then the second belief is that the UDL framework cannot be truly attained without technology. Now, I personally am of the first, viewpoint that the UDL framework really, as a framework itself, doesn't require technology. We can use other materials and strategies. And actually, in that same text, you'll see that there are several examples of different very no-tech solutions to teaching mathematics and other things that don't require high-tech solutions or even mid-tech solutions. So it's not absolutely required, and so both views have merit. But the truth is that so technology by its nature is something that is providing tools to support functions to accomplish goals. That's like the basic definition of technology. So UDL by its nature does begin with goals, and technology is really just one of the tools that we have in our toolbox to be able to support the attainment of that particular goal. And so it fits in as one of the materials we could use. We could use technology to support our instruction, as I'm doing today. And we can also use technology within the area of assessment to provide variations there. So it can be a very, very powerful tool, but it's not absolutely necessary. If we don't have a lot of high-tech devices or even mid-tech devices, we can still think about how to use universal design for learning in a meaningful way. But to talk a little bit about what the power of technology does provide, technology can support variations in access, and technology really is a way that we can transform information into a variety of formats. So we can see by those, two statements that technology can be a powerful partner when we're looking at using universal design for learning and implementing UDL strategies. So because it allows the manipulation and control of the format of information, it also can offer various alternatives for access, moving from low tech to high tech solutions. And I worked for many, many years before I got involved with universal design for learning in the field of assistive technology supports for people with disabilities. And there are so many different things that can be done, from very low tech to high tech solutions that provide alternatives for access through technology. It can also provide multisensory instruction. We're using the internet so much these days, and video instruction and closed captioning and various things like this. And so technology supports all of that multisensory presentation and instruction. It can also support much greater personal independence. There are many individuals I know who are able to function very independently within their environment because of the use of some low-tech solutions like a regular white cane or other types of high-tech motorized wheelchairs that can go up and down stairs and various things like that. So there's a wide range of technologies that can help to support individuals' independence. And then we have this whole idea of educational and assistive technology. Educational technology sometimes is thought about, technology just general, right? And then assistive technology as that special technology that supports individuals with disabilities. But in reality now, with the way that technology has been advancing, the separation between general or educational technology and assistive technology really doesn't exist anymore. It's more what I'd like you to think about it as is a continuum of supports, a range of supports that moves from different ways that technology presents information to other different ways that maybe some people would need to have that information presented and accessed. But technology really exists along a continuum. It's not just general technology and assistive technology over here. So technology offers a continuum of solutions for varied needs. So that's a lot to think about with regard to technology. Remember, I did say, while it is powerful, it's not absolutely necessary in order to be able to move forward with universal design for learning, but it can be a very, very powerful assistant. So where do we begin with UDL thinking, our UDL planning? Just to review, we have the structure of the framework, we have the 3 principles, we have the 9 guidelines, we have the three guidelines for each principle. Each guideline has several checkpoints, and then also reminding that the order of the principle implementation does not matter. We can start wherever we want. And here's a graphic, a different kind of graphic representation of universal design for learning that you see on the right there, with the networks and the principles that come from the brain networks, and then the UDA guidelines. And just to give you a couple of simple ideas about universal design for learning, this is a slide that I've used for a while to start to think about how we can vary our instruction. So in order to vary the means of representation, we can use color to highlight key terms and ideas. And you see that that's something that I do throughout all of my presentations. What does that do? It brings our eye to the most important things on the screen, right? And it also helps me as a presenter, because then I don't have to read every single word that's there. I can just look at the areas that I've highlighted and say, and I can talk about those. We can use pictures to reduce our language barriers in order to vary multiple means of action and expression. A couple simple ideas are to encourage verbal restatement by students. So having students, if you're teaching something and you want to be sure that your students understand it, you can ask them to verbally talk about it, restate what you've just taught to, and then you can, that's a check for you to know if they've understood what you've stated or what you've presented. We can also encourage demonstration to peers and to yourself as the teacher as a different means of their showing what they've learned. And thirdly, in order to vary means of engagement, we can help students relate the content to their own lives. That helps to connect them to their learning. Or we could also have students share and support each other by working in pairs. And that was actually one of the solutions that someone on the Jamboard had for engagement as well. So we're all thinking about things in the same direction. thought it would be helpful here. So those are general ideas about universal design for learning. I thought it would be helpful to for me to share with you a couple of examples of how universal design for learning has been used and implemented. These are examples that I've been involved with directly. And I selected these examples because they do demonstrate recognition of those cultural factors that we want to keep in mind. So back in 2012, I had mentioned that I had worked in South Africa with Dr. McKenzie, and I developed a workshop. I was going to say a webinar, but it was an actual in-person workshop that was presented a couple of different times in South Africa, but in this particular time at the University of Cape Town, we presented this workshop for teachers and therapists, introducing them to universal design for learning. And from that workshop, it was a 2-day workshop. We went through a number of different activities and information and things like that. And we gathered the materials from that workshop and we presented it in an article that is available through the African Journal on Disability. And you can read all about the outcomes of that early work in universal design for learning. And the wonderful thing about the African Journal on Disability is it is an open source journal, and it actually has several other articles by Dr. McKenzie and myself that look at universal design for learning in policy and also in higher education as well. So that was one of the early exploratory workshops here in South Africa. I went on and I did provide, I used universal design for learning for some higher education training in 2017 in Brunei. And you can see here the students, they're working on their, using the UDL educator checklist in order to plan instruction for their classes. This was a very, very interesting opportunity. And it gave me an opportunity to take into account the cultural factors that were involved there in Brunei. It's a Muslim country. It has certain expectations for education, and we talked a lot about those as well. So that was another example of UDL coming into a cultural context. More recently, I've worked with adults, with adult education teachers in India at Om Creations and Om Abode in Mumbai. And the educators in this particular, Om Creations is a training program for, it's mainly women with various types of developmental disabilities, but there are some men who are at Om Creations as well, because they do not have a similar program just for men. So they've expanded the scope of who they have there. And these individuals are developing some basic education skills and then vocational skills as well in order to be able to work. And so the teachers didn't have very much educational background at all, but they were basically artists or culinary people or various folks who were working in different types of training programs there, vocational training programs. So what we did was we designed a training that looked at the introduction of the UDL principles and taking into account that they had a background as artists and in other professional areas, mainly in vocations. And while they had a lot of professional skills, they were really challenged to understand the principles of universal design for learning. So this is what we
have
just a few minutes left. So you might want to, I'm not sure if you want to give the space for. It was a 2-day workshop. This was the presentation, following presentations. And what they did was they went on to integrate these universal design principles directly in their practice, translating the UDL scripts, providing practical examples. So that was a wonderful experience. And then recently we had training with teachers in Mumbai in a
Sorry for the background noise.
workshop, and then in a 10-hour training that provided, that taught about universal access and UDL and various cultural and individual philosophies for inclusive learning. And this basically is just a layout of all of the things we covered within that 2-week, 4-session 10-hour training. So it gives you an idea of the scope of what you can do when you're working with UDL and how it could potentially be presented. And finally, we have where UDL is looking now. The CAST has an initiative going on now where it's working to expand the UDL guidelines to better incorporate the factors that it has systemic factors like language and background community factors that that provide other barriers to learning and outcomes. So it's really looking at expanding its understanding of intersectionality and bringing that dimension into the UDL framework. And this is an ongoing effort, but the link is there where you can learn more about it and take a brief survey if you'd like to be involved with helping with that initiative. So that's where UDL is going now. And I have several resources that I've listed, 3 books, one on higher ed, one looking at the full scope of education, and then the other specifically on UDL, and the links to be able to get those books and various resources that are available for you that I think would be helpful in your exploration for UDL. So, and then this is your assignment that you'll be doing for the class. You have the chapter that.
Right, so we'll stop here because the activity changed. So that was a long lecture that looked at where Dr. Darton took us more in-depth, into those 3 areas. How she tried to facilitate understanding of UDL. The one we did last week was the knowledge around UDL. But now she spoke about those tools, checklists, frameworks, and the educator's step-to-step guide and the rest of it. And then also just talked around a few of the activities and how she was trying to facilitate UDL implementation. Okay, so let's first just go through any thoughts you have on the video, and then I wanted us to just have a discussion. We still have time, right? Yeah, we still have time. For the rest of the time, we're going to have a discussion in terms of why do you think UDL is important? 1, why do you think UDL is important? And 2, how do you see it? How do you see the implementation in your context? What do you think will be challenges? Yeah, let's put it like that. What do you think will be challenges that will come up for implementation of UDL within your context? Okay, so why you think, let me just put in the chat. Important and It's all about how do we make sense of it from our context for C. Okay. So as we're discussing what are the highlights you found from the video, we may cover some of these things. Yeah. Okay, I see some things in the chat. Okay, now I did pre-lecture reading and I found out that one of the principles, so Kelebuhile says, I did pre-lecture reading and I found out that one of the principles or highlights of UDL is that it is not necessarily focusing on technology, but to provide multiple pathways for the students to access, engage with the demonstration learning. That is interesting. So anybody, that's a very important point you're making. That's a very important point. Okay, he goes further to say, also being thinking out loud about UDL and Global South conceptualization. As we all know, UDL has significant potential to contribute in Global South perspective because it encourages teachers to anticipate learners' diversity and reduce barriers to learning. However, the implementation must be contextually relevant for African schooling environments. For example, UDL framework may assume every classroom has high-speed internet connectivity, computers, assistive technologies, and abundant teacher resources. Those things may be unrealistic to us, therefore should not be reduced to technology alone. Yes, yeah. So maybe let's cover what the comments Kelebuhile just noted. The first one talks about what Dr. Danton spoke about, that it should not be dependent on technology. Anybody want to comment on that or any other aspect? Afikile?
Hi, Dr. Iken, everyone. I wanted to share that I think that implementing UDL, it could be easier said than done, because in many South African public schools, teachers have large classes, limited technology, and very limited time to prepare different learning activities in order to meet unique learning needs for each student. So, and then while UDL promotes equity, teachers, for that reason, they may find it difficult to apply all its principles, all the UDL principles without adequate support. Yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you for that. But did anybody pick up, or even you have figured, anybody pick up, what do you think, what does UDL recommend to try and address some of these challenges you spoke about, which are very important, which are realities in our context? What do people think? What does UDL recommend we do to try? UDL is not saying that you're going to remove every single barrier, but is to reduce, barriers to learning as much as possible. How do you think we can address that? The barriers you spoke about, large class size, limited time, and the rest of it.
I think that we can do so by trying to partner with different learning institutions and also different sectors, as well as implementing more training workshops for both students and teachers, as well as involving the voices of learners with disabilities and their communities, so that you can also know what they actually think inclusion means for them, not thinking on their behalf.
Definitely, I agree. And in the spirit of UDL, you see, when we are giving these kind of suggestions, UDL, as you know, multiple means, multiple ways. UDL is about finding different pathways to the same goal. She talked about you have the goal, which you want students to achieve. Then you have the methods. then you have the assessment, and you have the materials. So it's different ways and different pathways for us to be able to get to that goal. So definitely partnering with others. If that's why I always like when they talk about communities of practice. So having community of practice where teachers share best practice. Okay, this is how I did. So someone might have found a solution in terms of large class sizes. Someone might find a solution in limited time. But UDA specifically says that we need to anticipate learner variability. So that means from the start, when you're actually thinking, or even if you already have the goal, before class starts, is to sit down and say, okay, these are the course outcomes, or these are the learning outcomes we want our learners to achieve by the end of the year. Okay, which kind of learners are likely to come into my class? And then you now start anticipating, okay, what if I have someone who is blind? What if I have someone who has language difficulties? What if I have someone who finds it difficult to only learn with text alone? Well, remember when she had those two columns? The first column was the traditional way in which we teach text, written form, discussion, and the rest of it. And she now talked about a need to vary those ways, have a combination or different ways in which to be able to achieve the same thing. So it's very important. UDA talks about design, so variation from the design stage. Okay, so that means you are anticipating these are the kind of learners I might have in my classroom. So let me prepare for those kind of learners. And then you provide the multiple means for those kind of learners. And it's very likely that when you do that, you would have accommodated more than 80% of learners in the class and in the way in which they learn. Yeah, so we get, because people are unique, you will get people who might require this or that extra here and extra there, but you will. So that's very key. I wanted to bring that out. That's very key. So it's not about you start your lesson and you start to do what we call retrofitting. So that means retrofitting means that you try to implement the multiple means only when the challenge arises during the course. No, yes, of course, you can do that. The challenges will arise that will require you to do that. But what UDL is saying is that if you start from the beginning, from the design stage, to anticipate the different kind of learners you're having, you have much better success, So I wanted to highlight that. But what you're saying is very, very true. Partner with others, training of teachers, and involving students with disabilities. Definitely. I think Unati wanted to say something. Let Unati come in, and after that, Cedric.
Yeah, okay. I'm tempted to say Cedric must come before me, but I wanted to add to what you are saying, and to say if we're talking about a design stage, it also means that UDL should not only be a focus of a classroom setting, also from a policy and a curriculum design stage, where we know that if we are going to take inclusive education and we are going to have a mixture of learners in one classroom, then we should not overload the curriculum such that it is impossible to implement all these multiple means of variation that is needed. I know that we're still going to go to curriculum, what is it called? Curriculum, it's not variation, differentiation. It's different from UDL, but if we want to implement UDL, then from the curriculum stage, curriculum development stage, for instance, with the CAPS curriculum in primary and high schools, it might be very difficult. But also you do see that in some schools, they don't teach everything that is in the textbook. They look at what is the important information that these learners must know by the end of the term, and they focus on that. They still teach adequately, but they don't overload. So if from that stage we can design curriculum such that, or we can influence the inclusion or the consideration of UDL for our bigger classrooms, then it will be manageable in classrooms. But I just wanted to take it a step back to say, let's not focus only on the classroom. It is implemented in the classroom, but the preparation for its implementation and the creation of time and space for it to be implemented needs to go back to the curriculum design stage for inclusive education. Yeah, we can go to Cedric now.
Thank you, Nancy. Very, very important. When, like she said, when designing it, think about that. Yeah. Cedric, go ahead.
I just wanted to agree with what Akile said about it's easier to speak these things, but to put it into the implementation is always the difficult part. Especially because the disabilities vary and it's difficult to implement UDL. Just to go back also to avoid segregation and exclusion in the process, because focusing on specific how do you say which need is more important than the other need, or which learner is more important? So we must be careful to not in the process of implementing or trying to implement the UDL, that only certain learners will benefit from the UDL process. And just jumping into what Unati said, my thinking is also in terms of systemic changes and policies. That is also where we need to begin. Because if we don't start there, then how do we ensure that UDL gets implemented from the foundation phase? Yeah, and also what I think I mentioned in one of our previous sessions, my thinking is that we should focus on skills development from foundation phase. When you get to a certain stage, certain phase at school, we focus on a specific skill instead of relying on the how can I go back? I can go back to the coloniality, how we were the knowledge of how we got to where our system is currently. Can we change that in thinking of our current system, where a learner spends 12 years at school, but at the end of that qualification isn't really worth anything. But if you focus on skills development, it's a different story. Yeah, that is
so you are echoing what Amani, one of Amani's study found. In fact, I think it's his PhD found what fathers with children with intellectual disability were talking about. They were actually saying that, you know what, we don't actually see what my child, going to special school, what they are, what they are learning. What they are learning, there's nothing that, there's not a lot that teaches them to become an adult, and then be able to independently live on their own. These skills you're talking about. So they were saying that as much as we're teaching knowledge, knowledge and things, but we also need to teach skills that people are able, because that's the purpose of education. That when you finish, you're able to independently sustain yourself, your family, and the rest of it. So there's a lot to pack there. The knowledge is very important. Knowledge is important in terms of when we go into decoloniality. Knowledge is important because we need to address because political decolonization happened, but not every other systems remain the same. And that's why, knowledge creation, how knowledge is created, which knowledge is valued, those things remain the same. And that's why how we conceptualize disability is not yet, and like United and I said last Tuesday, it's not documented, it's not published. To document and to publish, you need money, you need resources, you need all those things. So it's a kind of, and UDL is not saying throw away reasonable accommodation or other ways in which we used to include learners and everything, but he's saying that, have this as a overarching, but that's why he's saying that you may use technology, you might achieve it through technology, you might not, it depends on your context. Okay, let me give other people an opportunity. Alice, then after Alice, Mbali.
Okay, I just wanted to add on to what Cedric and Fikile and Dr. Onatu were saying about the whole curriculum system. So in my head, I'm like, before we can even think about how we're going to adapt the curriculum into the UDL, we also have to try and not a copy and paste of the UDL from the global north, but try to use it in a way, try to reframe it for the global south, considering that the global south has different cultures and languages. Because if we are to just implement it into the curriculum, we have to make sure that we implementing it to the context of the global south as a whole.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So it's like if we are taking the what is it? If we say we are using devices for, like, example, the hearing aids, do we have the resources in Africa to actually have hearing, to actually implement those hearing aids into the curriculum as part of the curriculum? So it's a matter of, as much as we want to implement it, we have to make sure we're not doing a copy and paste of the UDL frameworks from the global north.
Very much agree. That was the other question I put in the chat. Said, why do you think UDL is important, and what are the likely challenges you foresee implementing it? So that's very, very true. I mean, Dr. Dacton said her suggestions were to make sure you look at the local educational laws. Nancy was talking about it, the policies, and Cedric was talking about it. They said cultural priorities and intersectionalities, understand the key terms, and the current practices and barriers. That barriers, where you now start looking at infrastructure, technology, and the rest of it. So I definitely agree with you. And to critique it, because it's very important to see, okay, how the UDL's view of what it means to be a person, does it align with African views of what it means to be a person? Those kind of critiques. Okay, Mbali, go ahead.
Good day, everyone. I don't think I'll say anything different from what everyone has said, but with this second semester since we started, I'm struggling with us having to talk about inclusion, and also UDL is all about that also. But it's just that it's talking about making the environment bearable for the learners, right?
Yeah.
But my thing is, teachers are not trained properly. That's where I'm at. When you talk about curriculum design, like Unati was saying with Cedric, how about we change the curriculum for teaching the teaching the teachers, if that makes sense? Because I believe that's where it should start. It should be made like a specialty, someone who's specializing in inclusive education, so that it would be done correctly. Because in terms of assessment, when we are taught at College of Education, we are taught on how to assess the learner. It's exams. You just want to know if someone remembers something. You want to know if someone relates on whatever was taught that day. We are taught on how to assess students. But then if there is someone, okay, let me make an example. I, as a teacher, I know in my class I can have 50 students. But if I know that Alice, Asanda, and Afikile always give me correct answers, I'll be directed to them, whether I like it or not. So I'll focus more onto them than the other ones who do not usually give me the correct answer. So now just imagine when with someone who has hearing impairments, not permanent, but some partially hearing impairment, partial sight and things like that. Imagine if now I have such learners in class, and surely they won't be giving me what I want in class. I'll focus on the other ones and neglect these ones. So I think it should start from when the teachers are trained. Then we can go into the classroom to say, let me make my classroom bearable for everyone. Let me make sure that my lesson covers everyone. Things like that. I'm there with the training. As much as I was trained in this inclusion, we are trained on how to do things in class, how to make sure that the lesson favors everyone. But is it happening? No, it's not happening. I know I've never done it. I know it wasn't easy for me to do it while I was still a teacher. We keep on saying this must happen, but it's not happening. When is it going to happen? I'm not sure. We've been implying for quite some time. Maybe that's why I said I'm confused, because
So-
I'm trying to put 2 and 2 together, and it's not happening for me.
Yeah, so we're actually talking about something that has not happened yet. So you are right. UCT only, see, I am Prof. Brian Wettermeyer when he was here in 2019. That was when we went to the DVC of Teaching and Learning at UCT. She has left UCT now, Prof. Liz Langer. We went to her and we spoke to her about UDL. And her words were that she's surprised that the first university in Africa is not using UDL. That's in 2019, just not too far ago. And we now started looking at, okay, how do we actually push UDL? We only actually started a university-wide project in fact, COVID was the one that precipitated it, that accelerated it. Started a project and it only just finished in 2023. And then we developed a framework called Enable, whereby with UDL as the background. And it's only from 2024, 2025, we're trying to roll it out as training for teachers, for academics. So you are very, very right. And you are making the connection with the first week of lecture, which we are talking about, because you're saying that teachers have to be trained. Because if you're training a teacher who still has a mindset in the deficit view of disability, that training won't do much for them, because you won't really see them seeing the value that it brings to vary the curriculum. So just sit and say, okay, it's another teaching method. There's a difference between seeing a strategy as a teaching method to seeing it that, what, this will actually help my learners to grow in class, to become critical, to understand. There's a difference between that. So that's why it needs to start not only just with the skills. That knowledge part is very, very, what is the lecture, what are the teachers' views of inclusive education? Is it a view still in deficit? Is it a view just, disability is another part of diversity, but learners with disabilities still need to be in a special school, because special school is where they get all the support they need. In mainstream school, no, they can't. Or a teacher who has evolved to the stage of seeing the barriers in the systems and in the structures. So you're very, very right. That shift needs to happen. And then in the training, you are largely right. Not very few teachers have had training, even or lecturers have had training on UDL. So this is still an introduction to introduce everybody to this concept for us to now start looking into it as you go back to your various practices, to now start saying, okay, how can I operationalize this? How can I look at this? And how can I do it? So
Sorry,
you're very right.
Sorry, can I add also? Sorry.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Unat, you can go.
Okay. I'm not sure. I don't like interrupting someone when they are speaking. I'm tempted to say you go, Mali, but I wanted to
just one line.
support. Yeah.
I wanted
Go
to
ahead,
say,
Mali.
I wanted to say, UDL is all about making sure the environment that is conducive for learners. And also, as much as I can say, I'll plan for this lesson, this is what I'm going to say after asking this question. If this does not go this way, this is how it's going to go. But with the limited resources that we are having in our schools, especially rural schools, we are still fighting for a lot for us to get to this stage. We will get there. Hence, I've been saying I'm confused, because now I believe another thing about inclusive education, and this keeps on coming up, new theories, new information keeps on coming. And of course, some it's not in a positive manner, some it's in a negative manner. But I guess we will understand as we're going on. This is something that when did it start? Yeah, we should check where it started and where are we going.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and come into.
Yeah, thank you, Mbali. Alice, we've noted your hand, and I see Isanda also
Isanda
wants
too,
to contribute to the conversation. I was going to say what you are saying, Mbali and Ike, is important. Now, my reflection is also that we have a challenge of politics that are playing part in education in general, and that becomes a problem for everyone. The reason why I am saying this is that we've had other curriculums. I want to reflect back on the curriculum issue and the teacher training issue. We need to. I'm thinking back on the CAPS curriculum and the OB curriculum that was before the CAPS curriculum, and I think there was another curriculum that was taught in schools before that. And every time these new concepts are introduced, there's a run around in the country. The teachers are running around because they don't know. They are expected to implement before a good foundation is laid for them to understand what is this, where it is coming from, how does it work, what tools are required for it. So the challenge that we have is that policymakers come up with the ideas, or politicians, and immediately implementation is expected on the ground, and there is no foundation that is laid. And I'm actually happy that this concept of UDL, I don't know if we are a privileged few that know about it, is actually being introduced, and it should be done systematically, and it should not be rushed, so that people get the concepts, so that when it comes to implementations and expectations, we know exactly what we are dealing with.
Yeah.
I want to
So-
make an example to say there was a with this OBE, I think teachers needed to have pictures and observations and I don't know, demonstrations. But it did not work well. When they started to grasp it, it was changed. People were changed to another curriculum of what's this, CAPS curriculum. And CAPS had a different principle or different principles from OBE. And now comes inclusive education, and inclusive education comes with a brilliant idea of UDL. We are developing as people, but the people who are supposed to be implementing these things get left behind. And somehow politics force them. I will say it's politics because I don't want to put blame on anyone. Kind of force them to implement things that they don't know. So I think really we need to work on laying a solid foundation for UDL, because it is really, really important, and it could be helpful. And we see how it's going to assist us in this context, like we are saying. So yeah, I wanted to reflect on that, to say we need to build a very strong foundation and a systemic foundation where people on top to the implementers in the bottom will have the same understanding of what we are talking about, so that when the time for implementation is done. I was working on a curriculum with my previous employer. I was developing a curriculum for another program, and we were advised to use an AI system that talked about UDL. I didn't know. I just knew about UDL, but I didn't know how I would implement it in my own curriculum or in my own classroom at a university. But for my curriculum to pass, I had to go to AI to extract it, because AI will do it for me, to extract from AI. Then it will pass. Now, the system, or the higher education department wants the curriculum that is done in that particular form. And that particular form demands UDL. And me, as a curriculum developer, I didn't know what I was doing. I did not understand it fully. And for them, they want to put it on AI, and AI will pick up that yes, it is UDL and they will pass it. But I don't think that us in the system understand fully the demands of UDL and what needs to be there as basic foundation for it to be taught. And imagine in the next 3 years, that curriculum will have to be taught by someone who was not there. I mean, who was not there when I developed it and when it was passed. 3 years down the line, it will have to be implemented by someone else who has got no idea of what they should be doing. So really, really, we are in a crazy and complicated system. Yeah. I'm just saying these things so that we open our minds and to look at the possibility and what we can and what we can not do. UDL is coming into play, so we have to understand it. At the same time, I am very worried because the way it's being introduced is very shaky.
I agree with you. And so why I like how this conversation is going is that this conversation is bringing deep context. Is bringing is really is really bringing in these are the underlying issues for us if we want to go ahead with UDL. We can, if not, if we don't address these issues, what everybody says that if we don't address these issues, then just like you said, UDL will be on shaky ground and it will just be a band-aid over something and not really a real solution. But one consolation, and I'll give the other two, one consolation is that remember also, one step at a time. You don't have to take everything at once. You pick one part that you understand and you work with that. And then after you see it works and everything, you can ask, okay, let me move on to, let me consider this part. And, so in layers. So never look to say you want to put everything at once. No. All right. We're actually out of time. Alice, come in, and then Isandra, and then we'll go for break.
My comment is not really in addition, but it was just a question that came into mind. Like, so because the educational system that we're already using, that we are currently using, is based from the global north. So then should we then address decolonizing the global north and go back to our traditional educational system, which is the informal, formal, or the unconscious that we were using before the global north colonized us?
So
it's just a question.
You see why this part of the lecture was linked to decoloniality and why Unati and Cedric and Mbali were talking about policies, where it starts. Because those people who even do those policies don't even understand this impact that it's having. Because if they understood it, then the ways in which we're adopting things, will change. Yeah. So I won't say I have a straight answer to that, but I don't think there's a benefit in throwing away everything. No, it's around seeing what can work and what cannot work, because that's very important. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Unless it's a matter of we are now in this vehicle that is moving forward. We are not just going to get off in the next stop because we wouldn't know where we are going. We don't have documented African ways of education. But with what we have, we need to fill in the missing gaps and to make it relevant for us at the end of the day. And what we are going to throw away are all the things that are not relevant. Like taking things as they are and trying to fit them in the context where they don't belong. I think that's what we are doing. Not to change everything. If it was possible, it can happen with decolonization, and maybe a concept of Africanization of education will develop fully. And if we have our resources and our books and our structure, maybe in the next 100 years, then we can have our own system of education and our standards of pass or fail. And IQ checks. We'll have our own standards, but at this stage, we are still riding on this vehicle, but we just have to make ourselves comfortable to say we can take this and this we can reject because it does not speak to us.
So that's the key operative word I wanted to bring in that Unati just said. oftentimes what happens, we give up because it's uncomfortable. Remember, this has not, so we are working against 100 or 1,000 years of established educational system. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult for you and I for a while to come, but someone has to start the foundation. And then, well, it doesn't guarantee that we're going to achieve it. No, but normally how things happen is that someone lays the foundation. Other people come, build upon it, build, and before you know it, we start seeing the change. So what I'm trying to encourage is what don't see this, like Mbali was saying, it's not very clear, confused. That is the nature of transformation. When you want to do transformation, you're going to be confused. You won't know what to do. I remember when we started talk about decolonization. In fact, people say throw it away because you people can't even agree on the word decolonization. Because when you tell this person has a different meaning, tell that person has it. But we said no, even though we don't agree, we understand that as part of the process. Because we'll get to a stage where we'll come to a common theme. So just to leave that there. Then Isanda, then we'll go for a break. Then we'll come back to the charts later, please, people. Isanda? If you're talking, you're on mute. Isanda, are you there? All right, I think maybe either she's not there or she's having difficulties. Let's not take the time further. We will take her comment when we come back. And then if there's time, we'll read what is in the chat. Let's go for a break. And then we'll come back at 5. And then Amani should be joining us by then. So we'll bring these decolonial discussions we'll be having to that session. And then let's hear what Amani has to say about it. Bring it in. All right, people. Thank you. See you 5 p.m. Please come on time come back on time so that we don't go over time. Thank you.
Are you able